All right. So, real quick, just because I'm an organizer as well as a speaker, let you guys know, in case you didn't already know, which I'm sure some of you already do, tomorrow we have an open help desk thing all day, as well as 3 other talks. So if you weren't planning on coming tomorrow, maybe reconsider it, maybe come, I don't know. Free help on your WordPress site from a professional like me and others, so pretty valuable. Anyway, my name is Rob Ruiz. We're going to be talking about WP Ajax, the next generation. I'm going to warn you ahead of time, there's going to be many references to Star Trek in this, and if you're not as excited about that as I am, I'm sorry, because I'm not really even a Trekkie, to be honest. But I do like Star Trek The Next Generation. It's the best Star Trek. In my opinion, it's the only Star Trek. So there will be many references to that specific version of Star Trek in this. And it just went with the talk, okay? So just deal with it, all right? It'll be fun, I promise. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm the head organizer right now for WP Omaha, the meetup group. I spoke about it this morning. If you have any questions about what that is or why you should go or anything, flag me down after this. I'm one of the co-organizers for Wordcamp Omaha this year and last year. I own my own company called Bizzle Designs, basically just contract-based work on the side. I work full-time as a WP dev at Orion Advisor Services. I'm an instructor at Interface Web School now. I'm an instructor at Guitar Center, recording, music production, DJing, I do all that stuff. And then StarCraft, too. I'm really good at it. So if anybody here likes to play StarCraft, come at me, bro. We can get down 1v1, and I will dominate. All right, so what are we really here to talk about? We're here to talk about the end of the old way of doing Ajax in WordPress. So you may not understand what this means. You may not understand what admin-ajax is. If you don't right now, you will by the time this talk is over. But the important thing to know is that there was an old way, and there's now a new way. And there probably will be a new way in, 30 days or something. Probably not 30 days, but in a couple years, there may be a new one. I think we're good now. Thanks. And so basically, this whole talk is about transitioning from the old way of doing Ajax in WordPress to the new way. And that'll all become evident what I mean here in a little bit. Now, why is there a new way? Because as of WordPress 4.7, we get this beautiful new thing called the Wordpress Rest Api. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, hopefully some of you are thinking, since this is a dev course, that already existed before 4.7, and it did, but it came as a plugin. So you had to install this plugin, and then you could do this. And now it's in core, which means that as long as you're at WordPress 4.7 or higher, you can do this no matter what. So that would be why before it wasn't really the death of the old way of doing Ajax, because you still had to install some plugin. You were still dependent on something. What if you didn't want to install the plugin for whatever reason? You couldn't use this method. You still had to do it the old way. Now, since it's in core, there's no reason to do it the old way ever again. Oh yeah, I forgot he was in there. He's telling you about how it's in core, the warp core. Nobody's entertained by that, huh? It's okay. Reading Rainbow. So, how many people in here barely know about Ajax and are here to actually find out what it is? Good, it's fantastic. That means part of this talk will be useful to some people. Because we are going to start from the beginning, because I want to make sure even new people that don't understand Ajax or why you should use it or why it's even a thing or why I'm doing a talk about it, what it's for and how it works. So it's not this, okay? So get that out of your head real quick. It's not that, okay? It's also not the villain from Deadpool. It's also not that either. So it's actually more like this. And this isn't even entirely accurate, asynchronous JavaScript and XML. I mean, really, it's more like asynchronous JavaScript and JSON. Ajaj doesn't sound as cool as Ajax, so we still call it Ajax. but really nobody uses XML anymore. It's all JSON based. If you don't know what JSON is, it looks like this. So I know it's probably kind of hard to read, but essentially all we're looking at is a big, huge string of keys and values that you can access with JavaScript. And yeah, it'll become more obvious what that is later. You know Ajax is this, or one of these, mostly because that's what you're seeing, usually, when Ajax is happening in the browser somewhere. So anytime you see this on a web page, 9 times out of 10, there's some Ajax happening, you just don't know about it. It's basically just visual feedback to show the user something is happening behind the scenes. So the idea is keep people busy while you're processing data. Speaking of data, that's what you look like if you look at too many of those. All right, so this is kind of how it works. I stole this image from the internet. If you've seen it before, that's why it's familiar looking. Basically what we got here is we got, up on the top left, your browser, an event occurs. So this is a click, a scroll, a drag, a hover, any kind of event you can bind to the DOM. You create an XML, HTTP, whatever. You create an HTTP request, and you send it via the interweb to the server, your server. Not any server in the whole world, specifically the server that you're hosting your website on. You send it to the server, it processes the HTTP request, you create a response to send back to the browser through the interwebs, and then once it comes back, the browser essentially processes what's returned, and then you update something on the page to kind of give some kind of visual confirmation or functional confirmation that the process has been completed. So let's talk about when you should and should not use Ajax, because this will help it make a lot more sense for the people that don't know what Ajax is or why you would use it. So when you're performing small changes to the database, like updating user meta or post meta, or updating some options in WordPress via a click of a button in the browser or something along those lines, getting data dictated by the user. So an example of this would be like dynamic select dropdowns. So think of it like this. Let's say you have a page, a form. Let's say you got a form, and you've got more than one drop-down on there, but you need the third drop-down or select box you want the options in there to be dictated by whatever the user selects from the second or first drop-down, right? So if they pick one thing, then you get a whole different set of options in the following drop-downs. You may or may not need to reach to the server to get a super up-to-date list of data that corresponds to the option that they selected in the previous drop-down. Progressive saving, so really long forms, complex UIs, multiple click-and-go user experiences, basically saving data on the fly as the user interacts with whatever it is that you just built in WordPress. And then, of course, progressive loading. So infinite scrolling. I'm sure everybody knows what infinite scrolling is. You scroll down, it only loads 10 posts. You scroll down more, it loads another 10. You scroll down more, it loads another 10. Input completion. So think of like when you're on google.com and you start typing in some text and it like gives you 5 choices that match up with whatever it is that you're typing. That's all Ajax. And then one-page app user experiences where the user's literally never leaving that page. That page is just updating as they navigate through different buttons and stuff. That's all Ajax powered, or can be. When do you not use it? Performing big expensive callbacks. What I mean by that is functions that are really long and do a whole bunch of stuff. Usually you're going to want to chunk those down or just submit a post like you do any other form and reload the page. If the user is likely to have a sketchy connection, probably not a good time to do a lot of Ajax. So sites with a lot of mobile traffic, generally older demographic websites, sites catering to people in rural areas, anybody that's going to have a bad connection for any reason. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it at all, but be mindful of how much Ajax you're using. Hosting server performance is relatively sluggish, so cheap shared hosting, non-SSD hosting. If you don't get a lot of traffic, not a big deal. But if you're on a hosting plan like that and your website gets 100, 200, 300 hits a day, you're talking about 10 or 15 or 20 users at a time. They're all performing Ajax requests all over the page. It's going to slow things down eventually. It's going to build up. Cheap shared hosting. Oh, we already talked about that. Sorry. User is going to be redirected to a new page anyway. There's no point in doing it. Might as well just do it on page load. So, all right. So, like I said earlier, this method may not be like the best way to do it forever. The reason being is that there's an ongoing kind of debate or argument, or I guess just something we're trying to figure out within the WordPress community, is which one of these frameworks is going to end up becoming the replacement for Backbone in WordPress. Once that gets decided, there will likely be a new, better way of performing Ajax using one of these frameworks. In case you guys aren't keeping up in that battle, React is kind of winning that right now. Battle's not over yet, but it's looking very much in favor of React right now. So if you want to get ahead of the game and start thinking about how to do Ajax with React, might not be a bad idea, although if we go for Vue or Angular, it might be a SOL. So we're about to go over the old way. Know it, but don't use it, in all seriousness. Basically, the idea is all of you do researching online, you try to figure out how to do these things, and you're probably going to go Google how to do this after the fact anyway, after I give this talk. So I just want you guys to know when you're looking at tutorials, especially older ones, when you're reading through it, to be able to identify the old way. So the first thing we're going to talk about is setting up your JavaScript. And basically what we're talking about here is enqueuing and localizing the scripts. Hopefully this isn't over your head yet. This is pretty basic stuff. If you've ever had to put a custom JavaScript file reference on a page or on your website somewhere, you've had to do something like this. This is a very common enqueue. And all we're doing is basically telling it, hey, I've got this JavaScript file in the browser somewhere. I want it added to the page, usually in the footer, or at the bottom of the page. I guess it's not really called the footer in code. And then the second part, after the WP enqueue script, here kind of towards the bottom, where you see WP Localized Script, this is the part that things get kind of interesting. So how many people are familiar with using this WP Localized Script function? Good. That's what I like. Means you guys are going to get something out of this. So here's what it's supposed to be for, and here's how I use it. WP Localized Script was designed so that you could do localization in WordPress, translations, change English to Spanish to French to German to whatever. That's what the function was designed for. However, I don't ever use it for that. I actually use it whenever I need to take data that I want to grab using PHP from the server and inject it into a JavaScript file in the form of an object so that I can access it on the client side anywhere I want. How many people did I lose so far? Show of hands, don't be afraid. Lost already? Okay, we'll catch up later. I don't have time to slow down. This is a really long talk. So, just know that we're going to create a blob of JSON data that this JavaScript file can access. And it wouldn't be able to access it otherwise. So here you see the Ajax URL. This is being dynamically generated by a function called admin_URL, admin-ajax.php. This returns a full path to the PHP file for the Ajax API. And remember, this is the old way. Okay? And then the next step down, we're creating a nonce. How many people have no idea what a nonce is? I expect way more hands this time. Perfect. Okay, so the concept behind a nonce is that we want to make sure that the Ajax request that's being submitted to the server is one that's being expected by the server. Okay, so think of it like a key. It's like a serial key. That's all it is. Think of it like a password. It's a password we want our Ajax request to use that's being dynamically created by the server and therefore fairly impossible to guess by hackers and so on and so forth. So let's talk about what the jQuery looks like. So we're enqueuing a script. The script is going to have jQuery in it. We're going to use jQuery to perform the Ajax request. Do you need to use jQuery? No. Does it make sense to not use jQuery? In my opinion, no. Just use jQuery. It's really easy. Okay, so there's 3 different ways to start an Ajax request in jQuery. This example is using the get, but as you see across the top there, there's 3 different methods you can use. So let's go through this one step at a time. The first thing is this myObject.ajax URL. That we got from this step here, Ajax URL, except I called it my data in this one, so it doesn't really match up. But imagine that my data says my object. I think I have a laser on here, don't I? You guys see that? Nice. Yeah. My data. That's the key to the object, and these are the keys to all the properties. Okay, so that's all we're doing here. We're just saying, okay, whatever that URL is to send something to that admin-ajax API, I guess, it's that you can find it in this myObject.ajax URL. And then below that, we're like basically telling it all the data that we want to send to the function or the callback function that's going to receive the request. So all of this, the Ajax, the data, the nonce, all of this is going to be accessible within the callback function that we'll look at next. So just keep that in mind. Now the 2 bits of data, well actually, yeah, I'll just say these 2 bits of data are mandatory. Action, and it's always got to be called action, and remember, this is the old way. Action and nonce. You always got to have those 2. Now, do you have to have nonce? No, but you should. So I'm going to say yes. You do have to have the nonce, but you definitely have to have action there. And this action right here needs to correlate to something else we'll look in the next step. And then this data can be whatever you want. And it just depends on what you're trying to do. Whatever kind of Ajax request you're trying to perform, you just pump whatever data you want. I mean, it could be form data, right? It could be something they typed into an input field. It could be an option they selected from a select dropdown. It could be a whole entire form with a whole bunch of those, all aggregated into one object and then sent so that we can access all those values in the callback function and do something with all that data that the user gave us. And then the last part is what's going to happen once, this part right here, this is what's going to happen once the request is completed and it's been responded to from the server. So the server gets the data, we tell it to do something, it sends a response back, and then this, we pass the response into the function. I'm just console logging the response so I can see what it is in the console, in the inspect console. And then I'm saying as long as it was successful, then we win, and I can put all sorts of other functionality in here, any kind of, updating anything on the DOM. Just probably want to change something to show that the Ajax request has been completed. Is anybody still lost about what we're doing here with Ajax? We're doing real-time communication with the server. Well, mostly real-time. As real-time as it can get right now. Okay, so here's what the PHP looks like. Okay, so we're using hooks. Everybody here knows hooks, right? In WordPress, it's like kind of WordPress development 101, how to do hooks, right? So we're doing hooks. This is an action hook. And then essentially what we got here is and again, this is the old method. We got to do this. And if the user's not logged in, then you got to do this. So that's the difference between the 2. And then whatever goes here, where this blue text is, has to directly correspond with whatever we put here in the action. So we would have action underscore name at this part here. So this would be WP underscore Ajax underscore action underscore name. Does that make sense? So that's why you have to have the action, because otherwise it has no idea what callback to use. And then what we do is we just give it the callback here. Okay? So the green is the callback, is a reference to the name of the callback function. So this, whatever you call the callback function, has to match exactly what you put in here or in here. Okay? And then the callback function. I'm going to try and run through this real quick. So first thing we're doing is we're getting the nonce from the request. So you can see we've got this global $_post in all caps, and then we're getting the nonce name, nonce or whatever, right? That is this right here, nonce. So really, if these two things are to correlate with each other perfectly, what we should be looking for is $_post, and then in the braces, it should say just nonce, if we were talking about this one, right? Does that make sense? This key correlates directly to this right here. So then what we're doing is we're saying, okay, take that nonce, whatever, put it in this variable, and then verify the nonce. And this is just a built-in WordPress function designed specifically to verify nonces. That's all it is. If it comes back negative and it says, well, that didn't check out, then we do die, bust it, and we respond with this. And we don't do anything else. And that's it. That's the end of the function. It quits. If it checks out, we keep going down this line until it's done. Okay? Then what we do is we build a response array, and we just start pumping stuff into that array. And there's no limit to how much stuff you put in that array. You can put as much stuff as you want in there. Doesn't matter. Put a list of users, a list of options that successfully updated, whatever. It doesn't matter. And then we just send that response. So we're creating an array. We're pumping a bunch of stuff into it. In this case, I'm just setting success to true. That's it. And then this thing is JSON encoding the response, sending it back, and our response is done. Okay? So that's the old way. Was that complicated enough for anybody? Yeah, too complicated, in my opinion. So now, let us move on to the next generation. Is that all it took to get you guys to laugh? It's like my fourth joke. Anyway, and then I had no clever way of implementing the REST API logo into that whole thing, so I got kind of lazy and just slapped it there next to it. All right, so now let's do it the new way. And this is the cool way, the important way. All the cool kids are doing it, so you got to do it too, all right? So, in queuing and localizing the scripts, almost the same exact thing that we just went over, okay? We're still going to use WP and Q scripts. We're still going to use a hook. We're still going to enqueue the script like we normally do. It's the same exact script. And queuing here is nothing different here. Okay, where it starts to get different, and we're still going to localize it too, because we still need to push dynamic data into the JavaScript file so that it can be accessed wherever. Well, it's not really into the JavaScript file. It's actually just injecting it into the DOM, really is what's happening, or into the window object. So, we localize the script, but we're passing different values in this part right here. Okay? So notice how I'm saying REST URL, and then I'm just using this function that dynamically gets the REST URL for this specific instance of WordPress. Because that's not going to be same for every WordPress instance, right? You're going to be at a different domain and stuff. So, that's going to give it that, and then we got a specific nonce to use. You have to use this in order for this to work. So the last time, we were able to give the nonce whatever name we wanted. This time we cannot. You give it this, WP_REST. No other name will work. Does that make sense, everybody? Trust me, I tried it. I banged my head against the wall for like a day. Then I realized, oh, I can't just give it any nonce name I want. I have to use this very specific reference to a very specific nonce. And then it works. So yeah, WP_REST, just use that. Now, the new jQuery call. It's going to look, again, similar to the last one. Except the last one was a GET. This is an Ajax. Still the same thing. Still going to perform the same whatever type of request. The only difference between using Ajax and post or get is that when you use Ajax, you can literally perform any kind of request, where a post and get are specifically a post or a get, which is why we need to dictate the method here. So that's kind of like the biggest difference there. We still have to give it a URL, okay, but now the URL is much different. okay? We're not just giving it some variable URL. We're giving it an endpoint in the REST API that we create. So we register an endpoint with the REST API, and then it hits that endpoint instead of hitting the admin-ajax.php. Does that make sense? Anybody lost yet? Okay, so we're doing a post, and then this part here, very different. All we're doing here is we're injecting something into the header of the request. This and that. That's all it is. This is our key, and this is our value. That's going to go in the header, and it has to be called this right here. XWP Nonce. Okay? So, here's what's cool about this. Because we're doing it this way, now we don't have to verify the nonce in our callback function. The REST API will verify our nonce for us. We don't even have to deal with that. So it simplifies things, believe it or not. And then the data part. Okay, so this has to be called data. You can't call it whatever you want. You don't have to pass an action anymore. You don't have to pass a nonce anymore. You do have to pass this data, and it has to be called data. However, within this object, you can have an unlimited amount of keys and values. Essentially, how this gets translated is when it sends the request, or actually when it gets received by the REST API, it just converts every single one of these keys into a query string parameter. If you don't know what a query string parameter is, Google it. We're not going to go into that. But, yeah, obviously you can have an unlimited amount of query string parameters in any HTTP request. And so that's what it's doing, is it's going to convert whatever it finds in data into query string parameters. And then this is the same as before. Once the request comes back, then we do some stuff on the DOM. That's it. So same type of thing as what we did before, just kind of different. So here is what the PHP looks like. Different callback, and now we're not using the same hook that we were before. Before we were hooking into the WP underscore Ajax underscore whatever variable hook, right? Now we're just going straight to the REST API init hook, and then all we're doing is creating our endpoint. And this is very similar to how you create an endpoint for anything else in WordPress. So if you're not up on the REST API, well, you will be after today, because I'm pretty sure there's like 2 other talks about it. So stay tuned for that. And then we're just, all this is doing is saying, okay, here's the method that we expect, and then here's the callback that we're going to run. And then this callback name needs to directly correspond to this function name. And then we're just running the function. And then again, notice the lack of nonce verification in there, thus cleaning up the function quite a bit. We're still creating a response array, and we're still just performing whatever PHP functionality we need to do in order to do whatever it is we're trying to do. Update user meta, delete user meta, update option, add user, whatever. I mean, you can use Ajax for almost anything. So you're going to call some WordPress functions here, and it's going to do some stuff. And then when it's done doing it, it's going to send the response. Cool? Looking good on time. So why do we need to do it this way? First of all, it's cleaner. And we're utilizing new technology that just got added. There's a reason it just got added. There's a reason it's an update and an upgrade, because it's better. So here's just some statistics on kind of the performance of how this works. I bit this from this guy at this website. So I'm trying to be nice here and give credit where credit is due. This is the old way, using the old Ajax method. So we're at about just under 600 milliseconds. The new way averages around 500 milliseconds. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Not a huge difference. However, that's per request. One request at a time. Imagine adding 100 milliseconds each to, let's say, 20, 30, 40, 50 Ajax requests happening all at once. It's going to make a big difference. Now you're talking about 1,100, 1,200 Like it'll exponentially, well not exponentially, but it'll stack. So it is an improvement, a significant improvement for sites that get more traffic. Now, if your site doesn't get that much traffic, yeah, no, it's not a very significant improvement. But you never know how much traffic a site's going to get, so might as well just do it the more efficient way, even if it only is a little bit more efficient. And that's how we win. All right, so we're going to get into demos. But first, if you want to learn more, take my advanced WordPress workshop at Interface Web School. Saturday, September 16th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Anybody here taken Josh Collinsworth's, I don't know how to say your name, sorry, with plural. Josh Collinsworth, apostrophe S. Have you taken his WordPress class? Anybody? You have? Okay, so that is a prerequisite to this, or you have to just have like significant amount of experience with WordPress development that's equal to at least what Josh's class covers. So this kind of just builds on top of Josh's class, which we will be talking about this, specifically Ajax requests, and then also much, much more REST API implementation and object-oriented PHP and all sorts of other fun stuff. Yeah, so September 16th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's an all-day thing. Check it out at that URL. I'd love to teach you more about how to be really, really smart with WordPress. Okay, so before we get to the demo, which I don't even really have set up, but we'll see if I can crank one out in like 15 minutes. Are there any questions? Please be questions. Because otherwise I feel like I just lost everybody.
Just out of curiosity, how long do you think it's going to be before they pick a direction on 3 different options?
Your guess is as good as mine, man. I don't know. React, Angular, and Vue. Actually, Angular, and at this point, from what I understand, is off the table. So it's basically between Vue and React. React is pretty much winning by a landslide. Right now, it's a pretty safe bet it's going to end up being React. But who knows? I don't know. Vue is very new.
Oh, but it's better than.
I'm sorry?
Oh, but it's better than.
Arguably, yes. Arguably, it is better than Vue because it is slightly more performant than React. But if it doesn't get as much as adoption as React does, then the argument can be made that it's not better. But even if you do use React or Angular or Vue to do your Ajax, you're still going to need to know how to set up the endpoints to accept the request and to run the callback function. Any other questions? Come on, guys. Don't let me down. There's got to be something. There's no way that made perfect sense to everybody in here. I'm not that good.
Is it practical to do the server-side endpoints and the stuff that's using it in 2 different implementations? Is there any, how much do they have to know about each other's naming conventions or anything? Basically just the structure of the data that gets transferred back and forth, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So whatever the structure of the data is in the Ajax request, so in this case, in that Jquery Ajax function, whatever the structure is of the data in there is going to dictate the structure of the PHP callback function because we've got to be able to grab that data from the request in order to process with it, right?
Oh, and the client side has to know the slug for the server side, right?
Yes. Yes. But that's what the localized script part is for, so that we can easily hand that off to the JavaScript file and easily access it. Anybody else? Really, no questions? Josh, come on, man. Give me something. Nothing? Pretty boring? Okay. We'll do a demo. All right, so this is a website online, and this is doing it the old way. I'll tell you that right now because I haven't gone back and updated this code since December. So here's where I'm localizing my scripts and enqueuing and doing all that good jazz. And now I have to remember where my Ajax requests are.
Which ID is this?
This is high school impressions. Oh, IDE, I'm sorry. PHP Storm. That's what you're looking at by JetBrains. Yes. And I mean, it's pretty much a go-to for WordPress plugin development, from what I understand. I love it. So in case you guys are looking, if anybody's looking for a new IDE to pick up, this thing is solid. I love it. Love it so much. All right, so now I got to think about where do I have some Ajax happening. I got it kind of all over the place here. Ooh, I know a good one. Okay, never mind. Let us do this guy here, I think. All right, let's navigate to the actual page where it's on. All right, so I'm going to open the inspect window here. I really don't like how small it forces my resolution to go when I'm hooked up with VAGA, but it is what it is. Now we're going to look at the network console, or the network tab in here. And I want you guys to keep an eye on this thing on the right once I scroll down to the bottom of this thing. So remember how we were talking about infinite scroll earlier? That's exactly what I'm doing here. I made my own custom infinite scroll so that I only have to load up, I think it's like 12 or 20 images of shirts here. And then once I get to the bottom, I load another 20. And then once I get to the bottom of that, I load another 20. And I just keep going until there's no more to grab. So let's have a look at what that looks like in the browser, because it'll make a lot more sense once we see this guy right here. And I'm going to change this to this mode right here so it's easier to read. Oh. All right. Do I need to zoom that in? I don't even, can you even zoom in the console? I don't think you can you? Yes. All right. Sorry, I got way too excited there about that. How do I get this to go away? There we go. All right. So this is, you can see it says admin-Ajax right there. That right there is a dead giveaway that this is using the old Ajax method. But the Ajax request itself still looks the same when you look at the data that's being sent, for the most part. So when we scroll down all the way to the bottom, we look at query string parameters. And then this is where you see all the stuff that's being added in the JavaScript. So this is essentially an exact replication of the way I'm structuring the data that I'm sending to the callback function. So what am I doing here? Okay, so I've got my action name. This directly refers to the hook that tells it which callback function to use. And then what I'm doing is I'm sending a count of how many I have loaded. So anytime I hit the bottom of the scroll, it counts how many shirts are in there. It sends that number here. Any guesses why I'm doing that? I'm sorry, one person at a time. Raise your hand. Go ahead. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page. That's correct, yeah. So that's exactly right. And then all I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, this is the category that I'm grabbing these shirts from. So that if I'm in a different category, because I can filter on this page, I'm pulling the right ones in there. And then I'm just using, if you guys are familiar with the WP query, the loop function, all I'm doing is I'm using there's a parameter that you could pass in there that allows you to skip X amount of whatever entries. And so I'm using that number to dictate how many to skip. So I'm saying skip 42, start from the 43rd one, and give me all the rest after that. And then I'm just appending them to this window. And then the response looks like this. And I know that's not very pretty to look at. So I will use this, which I never remember the URL for. I just Google it every single time. And I'm just going to plop it in there and process it so that it looks pretty. And so this is what it looks like when it comes back. And I specifically structure it this way so that I can parse it on the front end. So it gives me my image, and then basically every single one of those shirts gives me a lump of data that I use to dynamically create the HTML and add it onto the page right when the request comes back. So what does the code look like? I know you guys are probably expecting like a live demo. Sorry, I've had bad experiences with that in the past. And I'm sure you guys have too. So we're not going to do a live, brand new from scratch demo. But I will show you the code. So I believe it's in here.
There's something about working code that's so attractive.
There's my function where I'm checking the scroll, which has a whole bunch of commented out stuff. And then I'm sure I could probably, here, let's do this a lot smarter. That just sets the main height. I wonder if I'm using a get specifically, or if this is the wrong file. Oh, what is this? There we go. Nice. Search input, after prod query, get designs prefix, scroll check. I really thought it was in that scroll check. I think I just cheated and called the same function from before. So I think I'm just doing this every time. This category changes, jazz. Query default prod. Yeah, so for the most part, this is what it looks like. And again, you can tell I'm using the old school method. Why am I not showing you the new method? Mostly because I don't have any code on this computer that shows off the new method. Sorry. Any questions? It's going to look the same every time, though. I mean, the only difference is the URL you're hitting and how fast it is. So even if I did show you newer code, it would still look exactly the same. I mean, you should be able to get the same thing to happen on the browser either way. Do I need to zoom in on this? Are you guys, is anybody like actually paying attention to how this is written?
Okay, but the client side and the server side both have to do the new way because the nonce got put in the header with the new way, right?
I mean, you don't have to do it the new way, but if you don't pass the nonce, well, here I'm not even passing a nonce, like I said. You don't have to pass a nonce. But since this is just getting a list of designs and there's really nothing happening on the server side in that callback function, I don't care if some hacker makes their way into this one. They're just going to get a list of shirts, which is already available on the site anyway, and we're not updating anything on the server from that request, so it doesn't matter. So there's no security threat, really.
All I'm saying is that if you switch to the new way of doing it, you have to switch on both client and server.
Absolutely.
You could continue to implement the old way of doing it in parallel.
Right.
You can't break anything on the server side.
Right. You're absolutely right. You can't do the Ajax the new way and the PHP the old way. You have to convert both sides. Absolutely.
I'm not saying it's a limitation. I'm just trying to understand.
Yep. Yeah. So if you were to convert from the old way to new way, you would have to change both the JavaScript file and the PHP file.
But you could implement those. You could have the old and new way still operate both of them operating on the server during the transition period.
Yes. Absolutely. All right. Well, that's about it. If you guys got any other questions for me, catch me after this. Otherwise, stick around for BMO here. Came all the way from Texas, and is pretty much a rock star. So his talk will be fantastic. Thank you.